nerds, what's up? Today I want to talk about the Mary Sue trope. Generally, a character is considered a Mary Sue if they are too perfect or lack realistic flaws, perhaps they are too loved by everybody, and have way too many proficiencies. Now, this term gets thrown around a lot in book discussions, so today I want to discuss the history of the trope, what it actually means, maybe some characters that could be applied to the Mary Sue trope, and asking the question if it's really such a bad trope after all. See you after the jump. The original Mary Sue term was primarily used in fanfiction circles. In fact, the term originates from a piece of Star Trek fanfiction titled A Trekkie's Tale by Paula Smith. It was written as a parody of self-insert fanfiction, poking fun at authors' wish fulfillment tendencies in fanfiction. These characters tended to be overly loved, overly attractive, overly powerful, generally had romantic relationships with either Kirk or Spock, and generally died tragic, heroic deaths. Now, I actually looked up this original work, and it was super short, which I wasn't expecting, and also hilarious. My life is better for having read it, and I will leave the link below if you would like to read A Trekkie's Tale, but a great expert from it is this. "Gee golly gosh, Glorioski," thought Mary Sue as she stepped off the bridge of the Enterprise. "Here I am, the youngest lieutenant in the fleet, only 15 and a half years old." Captain Kirk came up to her. "Oh, Lieutenant, I love you madly. Will you come to bed with me?" "Captain, I am not that kind of girl." "You're right, and I respect you for it. Here, take over the ship for a minute while I go get some coffee for us." I was surprised to find during my research that there's actually quite a bit of contention on what the actual definition of a Mary Sue is. Obviously, the origin of the term was originally more narrow. It was specifically applying to Star Trek fan fiction. There was also this movement to talk about Marty Stews, which were the male version of the Mary Sue, which I think is very interesting because at least in the circles I go in, I find that the term Mary Sue is used gender non-specific to talk about any character that they think applies to that characteristics. I don't usually hear it just applying to women. So despite the fact that there's a lot of conflicting meanings to the Mary Sue, I want to offer up my personal definition based on my experiences in fandom and kind of what I see going around. A Mary Sue is a character who is important to the story, is ridiculously or unbelievably overskilled in too many areas, tends to be overly good looking, always liked, and lacks realistic or believable flaws. Now you'll notice one piece I left out of this was the author wish fulfillment. Now while I do think some Mary Sues do come up from a place of wish fulfillment, I don't necessarily think all of our usage of the term Mary Sue anymore comes with that kind of author baggage. I think sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. Now, if you want to know more about the contentious definitions of the Mary Sue, I will leave a link down below to tvtropes.com where there is a huge discussion on the different definitions that people have claimed belong to the Mary Sue. So let's talk some examples of the Mary Sue. I want to use two examples that I've seen discussed a lot in the last decade on fandom forums, and that is Rey from the sequel Star Wars trilogy and Kvothe from the King Killers Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. Let's start with Rey, who is often called a Mary Sue because she is good at almost everything she does without a lot of plot to support her skill in those abilities. Examples of this would be being able to fix the Millennium Falcon better than Han Solo, outmaneuvering TIE fighters in a tight space without seemingly having any flying experience, winning lightsaber fights without training against opponents that did have training, getting Jedi mind tricks right on the first go around, and always being in the right. Anyone who opposes her is portrayed as someone who needs to learn better. Now, I remember when I first saw the sequel trilogy, I was confused on how I felt about Rey. I really liked the idea of her, and I liked a lot of parts of her character, and I really liked how the actress was portraying her, so why wasn't I feeling super connected? And when I first started hearing people call her a Mary Sue, it just really all clicked into place. The problem is that Mary Sues can often come off very boring and hard to get invested in their story, and they tend to also have to knock down other beloved characters because they're the only one who's allowed to shine or be knowledgeable. Now, in fairness, there are plenty of overly strong characters in the Star Wars universe, so what makes people talk about Rey being a Mary Sue and not others? Let's examine that. Anakin Skywalker is a good example because he's super good at ships, right? Like he's overly good at flying them, creating them, but like that's just one thing. They tend to stick to it. He's unnaturally good as a pilot. And yes, he's an overly good Jedi, but they literally have a plot point to describe that. Like apparently he was birthed by midichlorians. So like that's the whole point, right? Like he's supposed to be powerful in that way. And then on top of that, Anakin has so many issues. I don't think we can realistically say he doesn't have flaws, right? I mean, he's like a villain origin story. So we see a lot of problems that Anakin has that I think tempers his overability in a couple spheres. Luke is another great example and really our original hero of the Star Star Wars trilogy, he has to get bailed out a lot. It takes 2 full movies for him to be a proficient fighter, and we do see him struggling often in the Force while he is being trained. I mean, the entire plot of the second movie is Yoda being like, don't do the thing, and Luke like, I'm gonna go do the thing, and then it failing miserably. He's shown failing quite a bit. And his failure is always his own, not because other people are necessarily failing him. I personally don't ever feel like in the original Star Wars trilogy, you ever have that feeling of like Luke is too powerful. As I talked about at length in my strong female character video, I do think this can happen to female characters because the director or the writer really wants to make a female character who is strong, and I think it comes from a good place. What they don't realize is that it makes the character flat and boring and just not something people want to connect to. Honestly, Rey becomes, I don't want to use the word cringy, but like the part where she teaches Han Solo how to fix the ship, like I felt like my secondhand embarrassment in that scene because it just seemed so too earnest and not realistic or funny or how normally these play out in the Star Wars universe, and there was something about that moment that didn't seem genuine with Rey, and that's what I think is the problem. Now, there are plenty of arguments that Rey is not a Mary Sue. I personally fall on the side that she is, which is kind of a disappointment because I think she had really good bones as a character. Now let's talk Kvothe from the King Killer Chronicles. Now personally I think Kvothe is a way more contested one, and I always see arguments about this on the internet. Let's dive in. On the Mary Sue side, he is the best magician, he is the best musician, he is the youngest to get into university ever. He has a perfect memory, he's the smartest person around, he's wanted for his skills by every woman he meets. And I go on and on. Particularly with a wise man's fear, there were people, and I am those people as well, who said that the ending with Fularian and the Free Love Society felt really like men writing women. It felt overblown, like the part where women are like, oh my gosh, he looks so experienced, and oh, there's something that's changed about him. We're like, women don't talk that way, which I think contributed to the Mary Sue-ness of Kvothe's character. Some people felt that this was an author wish fulfillment, writing a 10-year-old boy's fantasy. On the other side, people tend to point out that Kvothe gets himself in trouble a lot because of his arrogance and pride, which makes it seem like he's not a Mary Sue. There's also another alternate theory that because these books are all from Kvothe's perspective looking back, he is a very skewed narrator and is coloring all of these memories to make himself feel and look important. Where do I stand on this one? Honestly, I'm a little conflicted. I will admit in Name of the Wind, the idea of him being a Mary Sue didn't really cross my mind because I do tend to like powerful characters, so I can be a little skewed in that nature. It wasn't until I read A Wise Man's Fear after that I started thinking that, particularly for the end scene that I talked about earlier. And as I saw those discussions online and I started being a part of them, I started kind of not being sure where it fell because I did feel like a certain author wish fulfillment in the second novel in particular. Now, I will admit I love the theory of Kvothe coloring all of his memories to make himself feel important and look better. I actually personally don't think this was Rothfuss's intention, but I do love it, and maybe we'll find out if it was when we read Doors of Stone. So ultimately, how do I feel about this trope? You know, just because something's a trope doesn't make it bad. I can think of a lot of tropes I like, although I will admit that the Mary Sue trope tends to be a trope that is talked about extremely negatively and is rarely seen in a positive light. Like I said before, I tend to like powerful characters, so that doesn't bother me in itself, but I will say that the Mary Sue tends to bring it to such a level that I do find annoying. I find it unbelievable and hard to get into a story when a character is good at absolutely everything they do. I do tend to prefer characters who are very good at a couple of things and very flawed at others. Additionally, when our characters don't have realistic flaws, I find it hard to get emotionally attached to their story, and I also can find it frustrating if no other character in the story is allowed to be good or powerful at something they do, especially if it's a character I've known before to be good and powerful at something. I think a great example of a sort of OP character that is absolutely not a Mary Sue is Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive. Now, I know Kaladin gets talked about a lot, but I think it's for good reason. Kaladin is an incredible fighter. He's an incredible survivor. He has a lot of skills. He is a good leader. But he has plenty of flaws and plenty of struggles that make his story interesting and connectable. You would never say Kaladin is a character that is good at everything he does. He is good at and very good at a specific set of skills. And his internal struggles and his flaws create problems for him throughout the story. And one I think of in particular is in Words of Radiance, that one scene. If you read it, you will know what I'm talking about. One of the worst scenes in fiction I've ever read from an embarrassment standpoint. So I'd love to know what you think about the Mary Sue trope. Do you think it's been overused recently? I do think sometimes people call characters Mary Sues when they're really not. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. What are your opinions on Rey or Kvothe, or both? Do you think they're Mary Sues? What are some other Mary Sues you've read in fantasy fiction, and how did you feel about those characters? Please let me know all of your thoughts below. And as always, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading, as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.